So in this section, we'll be talking about urban form, which is can be defined as the spatial imprint of a city. So what do I mean by the physical imprint of a city? Let me give you some examples. So in this picture or figure, you can see that different cities have different patterns. These figures represent the spatial imprint or spatial built environment of the city. So every human settlement consists of urban form, and these urban form have certain elements. And the interaction of these different elements form a pattern, which is called the urban pattern. So the figures on the right hand side you can see are different urban patterns of different cities. Every city has their own distinguished urban form or pattern. Let's talk about this one. This is, some of you have probably guessed, is Barcelona. So look at the physical imprint. Look at the what are the common things which you can see. You can see buildings, the shape of the buildings, the road network, the green areas, and on the right side you can see that these are basically in the old city center, and this is the new expanded Barcelona. So here you can easily determine using physical imprint of these areas. You can distinguish is the new and the old areas. This is Brasilia. So this is a developed or a planned city which is shape which is developed in the shape of a bird. These are the wings and the head and the tail. So this was developed in the Brazil, and it is the capital of Brazil. So here you can see different imprints. Like you can now see the water bodies over here. Okay, so you can see the physical build up area, some green areas, and some pattern of it. And beyond the city center, you can also see some expanded suburbs. This is another pattern. This is a small town in Italy, and you can just see a different pattern, which is showing you how this area looks like from the satellite. This is most probably, most of you would have guessed, is London. So here you can see a lot of greenery, some different type of road pattern, and some different type of greenery and structures of the buildings. This is Paris. So in Paris, you can kind of see some kind of spider web pattern over here, some the river, and you can even see the prominent buildings. If you can guess, then you can easily see what type of building those are. This is Venice. So here you can see from the picture, it shows different spatial outlook of the city. Here, instead of the roads, water is predominantly shaping the city. The urban settlement is shaped due to the water body or the channel of Venice. Now, what are the common things you have seen in these patterns? What are the commonalities of these patterns? Buildings, roads, green areas, water bodies, landscapes. So these are some, we can call some elements of the city. So what is urban form? It is basically tells you about how a city is formed through socio-spatial interaction with each other. So how does human form, how does human interaction with the built environment shapes a city or the urban form of the city? So firstly, the land ownership patterns. So whatever the land ownership pattern in the past was, that will determine how individuals will build their own structures. So that will, one way or another, kind of set a pattern at a very individual or at a very local level, it will shape a city. But as different individuals start constructing their buildings in their own patterns or in their own design, collectively it will shape up the city's environment or the urban form. Then comes with what are the local institutions, what are their planning regulations, what sort of setbacks they'll be imposing on those individuals or those buildings, how those buildings will be constructed, what would be the maximum or minimum height of the buildings, how much open space they have to provide for the building. That will also shape the individual structures, but as a whole, it will then influence the shape of the city. Then comes your existing land use. So, land use are basically what type of commercial or residential areas are existing in the city. In the past, or you can say in the old areas, the downtowns, the densities are usually very high. So, what kind of land use is already existing in those areas? Residential, commercial, industrial, that will also influence the development or the shape of the city. Then are the street patterns, or to some extent we call it the transportation system. That plays a very vital role in urban development. Wherever there is road, urban development will be done along those roads. So wherever there is a transportation network, that will instigate urban development structures, buildings, projects, that will kind of incentivize people to construct the buildings along those roads because it provides good accessibility, and that might trigger some kind of socio-economic growth in that area. So transportation, a very vital component which shapes uh, the city's overall patterns. So what urban form can be defined as a physical and geographic arrangement of land use and transportation facilities that will determine the urban form. Now, depending upon what type of transportation system and the land use configuration, land use patterns, or location of land use, that will determine what kind of city it will be. Will it be monocentric, or having only one downtown, or having multiple, you can solve CBDs or nucleus, which will spring up all over the city. We'll talk about these polycentric, monocentric in our coming sections. So, what kind of different types of land use or built up area is different types of, you can say, land uses or land cover are available in the built environment. So they are mainly classified into two types: the formal land use and the functional land use. Now, the formal land use are often also termed as land cover. So, formal land use shows what are the built up areas, what are the paved areas, what are the green areas, the water bodies. So, that tells you about the formal land use of an area. And the functional land use tells us what sort of function those built up areas are doing, like institutional zones, residential areas, commercial areas, that will determine the shape of the city. Now, another aspect from, especially from the from the climatic changes or the climate resilient development are the called the local climatic zoning, in which different areas, land cover, and built-up types are determined, and they are classified into different zones primarily based on the densities and the green areas. So, using a mixture of these zones, we can determine urban heat island effects or climatic risk zones in urban centers. So, this is another vital component of urban form nowadays in current researches. So, what type of urban growth is there? So, we were talking about different, you can say, types of urban form, but what about urban growth? So, for example, we were talking about the existing built-up of land use which is already there. A city, a traditional city, which is developed, let's say, 100 years back. What sort of development it can observe? So, first, there might be some areas within the city center which are still open and which can be built. So those type of development is called infilling. So sometimes the city is expanded and we call it extension. And especially if the city is extended or developed along the roads, we call it linear development. That is along the roads. And some development which is not some controlled or which sprung up haphazardly around the city, we call it urban sprawl. And then sometimes due to some large scale projects, a particular development is being done. For example, some industrial estate is being set up for a particular purpose, or social special economic zone is being set up. So that is kind of a large scale project which is a type of urban growth. Then comes your planning regulations. What sort of planning regulations or urban growth management strategies is being enforced in the city? So these are some of these are functional zoning, like everything is planned according to different land uses. And if we are going to be influencing or managing those areas with respect to densities, that is called intensity zone. And sometimes due to particular reasons, some local institutions incentivize development through reducing some different taxes or construction charges that will incentivize some kind of development in particular areas where the local institutions want. That is called the incentive zone. So coming back to our main elements that form those are buildings. So in different pictures we have seen previously, you might have observed some different, or you can say, important buildings or landmarks in the satellite imagery. So those form a pattern, or they influence your shape of the city. So what else did we see in the satellite imagery? The public spaces, the open spaces you might have seen in these pictures where the public might gather. So public space is another vital component or element of urban form which shapes the city. Like this St. Petersburg at Vatican City, that is a public space, kind, let's say, a type of element of urban form which shapes the city. Then the streets. What are the pattern of the street? How the streets are laid out? What is the layout pattern of these streets? That also signifies or influences your urban form. We'll talk about these patterns in the next section. Then is a transportation network. So by the subway station, the underground, you can observe that different type of transportation systems, they kind of influence your urban growth. So how these transportation system, wherever you're going to lay down a new track, you have raised the prices of those lands. And when the prices of these areas are uh, these prices surges, it incentivizes businessmen to construct building along these routes, especially along the stops. So that kind of development is also called transit oriented development. So transportation, especially the mass transit system, they influence your urban form. Then is the landscape, the open areas, the green areas, which might influence your urban form. So this is a picture of New York City Central Park, in which if anyone sees this picture, they can easily recognize that this city is New York. So different type of buildings, landscapes, streets, pattern, they can help in identifying different cities. Okay, so these were the elements, some introduction about urban form and its element. And the next section we'll be talking about urban form and the transport. Thank you.